Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everybody. Man, I just want to tell everybody, I hope you're having a wonderful Sunday or what's left of it. It's number one. My name is Preacher Moss, the host of the ShOUT show, the SOS. Thank you for tuning in. I know Sunday is always a hard day for everybody trying to get yourself together for the week and all of those things. And I get it, man. I totally get it. Today's topic, if you will, I may have to bring it back, but today's topic is simply, brothers and sisters, let's rewrite the Constitution. Let me say that again. Let's rewrite the damn Constitution. What do I mean by that? Well, we have all these protests going on, social justice and police brutality and all these things. And they're all relevant topics, COVID, healthcare, and all these topics, man. And I realized something, that one of these things, a lot of these things, if you will, are tied into laws that are framed, for better or for worse, by the U.S. Constitution. By all accounts, the U.S. Constitution, when it was written for a group of people. Let's call them white people. White people with means, if you will. It was meant for white people to have power, if you will. And I don't mean just power for white people. I mean, but power for rich white people, landowners and things like that. And so the average white person back then didn't really get the benefits until there was slavery and things like that. Now, I'm not going to spend time going back about that. I said, let's rewrite the damn Constitution because it's out of date. It's out of date. It's been out of date. It's been out of compliance. And it's just overall just problematic. You know, we talk about democracy, not understanding that the United States Constitution does not mention democracy, brothers and sisters. How can you have a constitution that does not recognize democracy, yet we hold it up to be every framework that we have in terms of our lives, personal lives, business lives, almost spiritual lives, have been framed by this Constitution, which is out of date, out of compliance, and in many regards, it's not relevant. Now, I can give you a whole lot of debate about the framers of the Constitution, and I can tell you that, yes, they were slave owners, yes, they were racist, but I'm going to tell you, at that point in time, when they put together the Constitution, in their minds, they were right. The people I will have to debate about the Constitution and the framework of it and the legitimacy of it, I'm not going to have that conversation with them because they're all dead. That's pretty much happened. If you're writing the Constitution in 17 something, you've pretty much been dead for a while. But let me lend this idea to you about the profundity of the Constitution. That every level of stress, struggle, push for freedom, push for justice, push for equality has been framed around the question, is it constitutional or is it unconstitutional? Let me say that again. Is it constitutional or is it unconstitutional? It is not it's something probably more than a miracle for African Americans to evolve a intelligentsia, if you will, that comes from the slavery, it comes from the plantations, through schools that aren't provided for them, through colleges that aren't provided for them, to learn law that is against them, and be able to take that law, understand it, interpret it, and fight against the law. And I'm talking constitutional law. I'm not talking about, hey, did you get hit? Did you get rear-ended by another car? I'm talking about the absolute discipline of constitutional law. Because people have forgotten, even if we talk about things about defund the police and da-da-da-da, you're going to run up against the same thing I'm talking about. You're going to run up against the Constitution. The Constitution, which does not specifically spell out or use the word democracy. You see, America has this thing about leaving things in place because it works for certain people. Doesn't have to be black people, doesn't have to be white people. It has to be the powerful people. The powerful people benefit from a constitution that allows them to hold on to power. And I say it's holding on to a power to the point where you don't protect anybody. You don't protect the people you're supposed to empower, and you don't protect the people that you're actually oppressing, which is a whole nother conundrum. When I say this, I want everybody to understand clearly that there's a problem. So for all the protests and for all the riots that we had, has anyone sat down with a fine-tooth comb and gone over the structural racism that's in the United States Constitution? And the fact that it's never been fixed. It's a can that's been kicked down the road for hundreds of years. Any idea of black liberation, equality has been a fight against the Constitution. Think about it. Brown versus Board of Education, constitutional case. Voting Rights Act, constitutional case. Think about it. Busing, constitutional case. Integration, constitutional case. The right to go to particular different schools, constitutional case. I'm telling you, people, this is the thing that I think we're missing. We need to develop a school, a historically black college and university, maybe 3 or 4 of them, that dedicate themselves to nothing but constitutional law. I'm not saying be lawyers or anything like that, but develop scholars around constitutional law, whereby we can free ourselves, whereby we can take the document and go to the masses and say, this is the thing that's been holding you back. This is the thing that's been problematic your whole life. This is the reason why your grandparents couldn't vote. This is the reason why you couldn't go to school over there. This is the reason why you couldn't live in that neighborhood. This is the reason why you couldn't go get a housing loan. And this is the reason. And if you start doing that, I think you raise the consciousness of people. I think you raise the consciousness of people. Now, this seems a little bit off topic from some of the stuff I'm talking about, but it's ironic to a point that it causes me pain. Not laughter, pain. Even now, brothers and sisters, in the middle of COVID, one of the worst healthcare pandemics we had, our president, or your president, not my president, that president, but that dude, whoever you call him, is pushing for what? The United States Supreme Court to rule Obamacare what? Say it with me, unconstitutional. The idea that constitutional law rarely moves forward and rarely moves back unless it's pressured bothers me. Because people use constitutional law, in my opinion, to substitute for moral law of God, common sense, spiritual law. We put these things in place and we've allowed them to stay. We've allowed them to stay and grab root. And when I tell people, when the going gets tough and the oppressors are not winning, what do they run to? The Constitution, a flawed document. We've got to start getting smarter. So I said, let's rewrite the Constitution. Let's start with Black Lives Matter. Black life matters and black existence matters. And so we're going to take out the fraction that a black man is only a fraction of whatever. And we say the black man is entitled to be a whole person, but in lieu of the fact that that's been held back for so many hundreds of years, the black man is going to be moved forward. We're going to have, in some weird sort of way, not just reparations, but tauba. The framers of the Constitution are not here, but the people that perpetuate that foolishness, that nonsense, the idea of that law, they need to repent to the people that they hurt. Not repent, that's the God, but I'm saying redeem themselves. That's number one. Number two, we need a Constitution that does not play with the lives of children, the innocents. Okay? You have young Latino kids in wrapping themselves up in tinfoil blankets in detention centers. And the only reason they're still there is because you needed to get a constitutional ruling. I'm telling you, folks, this thing is devastating. We have to get all these things figured out. And the problem with the Constitution, it just takes forever to get anything changed. The Constitution, in my opinion, set up government to be as slow and lethargic as possible. The House and the Senate are diametrically opposed pretty much on everything they do. And as a result, we don't see change. We don't see change. We don't see sincerity. We don't see integrity in terms of laws that are being produced to empower and grow up, love up the community, like I talked about. Love up the community. We don't have laws on the books that help us love up our community, love up our poor, love up our impoverished. It's not there. In the Constitution, it's a sieve. It makes sure that those people automatically sink to the bottom. And you know why? Because they don't know constitutional law. All they know is the oppression that comes when there's not an iota, if you will, of sympathy or empathy or concern. At the top level, it's not down at the bottom level. Now, what I'm going to say might offend some people right now. But I'm going to talk about white law. The problem with the Constitution is that it's white law. And you say, I mean, white people? No, it's white law, like white supremacy law. It's white supremacy law. And it comes over from overseas. So I don't want you to think it just got here to the United States and took root and got popular. You see, when people came over to the United States, it wasn't all a level playing field with white folks. Some came over with money, and some of them were servants, indentured servants. I'm not going to go into the whole thing of indentured servants, the slaves, all of that. But what it says is in London, in Germany, in these places like that, there was a system in place where there was the haves and the have-nots. And the thing that established the haves and the have-nots were what? Law. So when they came here, they were doomed, if you will, doomed to produce the same laws. We've suffered over and over about this Constitution over and over and over and over and over again. I say rewrite the damn Constitution, and I say damn Constitution because it's a damned piece of paper. It's flawed. At the very beginning, it's flawed. It left out Native Americans, it left out Black people, it left out women, it left out the poor. But if you're not in the room, as the old saying is, if you're not at the table, you on the menu. And that's exactly what we've been living with ever since that time. Now I'm going to talk about white law. And I'm going to bring up somebody who might be controversial, but, you know, he was controversial. He had some points. He had some really valid points, some lucid points. And I hope I don't bastardize him here on this show. His name was Minister Khalil Muhammad. He was in the Nation of Islam. Then he was put out of the Nation of Islam. He helped start up the new Black Panther Party. Controversial guy. But he talked about white supremacy and the lifeline. The breastfeeding of white supremacy is constitutional law. It's like a baby on a nipple, if you will. That's where it gets its strength. But that baby on a nipple, white supremacy, has never grown up. White supremacy is like a child that never grows up. What it needs for you to do is to stop growing too. It's like a child. He said something about the nature of a child, and I agree. The nature of a true child that investigates and engages the world is that child is always discovering. Everything they do is they discovered it. Mommy, look what I did. Daddy, look what I did. Auntie, grandma, look what I did. They don't understand that something was there pre-existing. So in their mind, it's a very selfish thing. It's a very egotistical thing. I did this. I did this. I did this. I discovered. I discovered. I discovered. But when you really, really start looking at it, that child has never grown up. That child that says, I discovered this, I break this plate, I push it, I destroy things, da da da. But they've never, ever grown up. All the great, quote unquote, explorers were just children that didn't grow up. Columbus never grew up. You know why he comes? He comes to America and he says, I discovered. That's what they say. Cortez, I discovered. And when they realized they didn't discover these civilizations in Mexico, in the West Indies, in America, in Africa, just like a child, they destroyed them. Let me say that again. They destroyed them. And I agree with Minister Khalil because he said something that was really, really important. He said, and the ones who grow out of childhood, the few that grow out of childhood into consciousness and awareness, sadly, those adults live their lives in fear of their children. We are watching children in places of power, and the adults in the room are scared to death. Have you ever watched some of the flunkies around Donald Trump? They know better. They know better. But they know they're watching a child and it scares them. Because the child mentality is, if you don't agree with me, I'll get rid of you. If you don't like what I'm saying, I'll get rid of you. I'll find somebody that will come in here because the child mind is very myopic. It's very, tunnel vision. So it can't have any outside counsel or outside advice and things like that. And it's interesting because that's where we are now. They're afraid of the child that is Donald Trump. And the thing that Donald Trump latches on to like a breastfed child is what? The Constitution that allows him to do this. Is it my imagination or is it madness that in the worst healthcare emergency we ever had, we have a fool that goes, get rid of Obamacare. I don't have anything else to give, just get rid of it. That you would put people in a dire situation, move them from a dire situation to a dying situation. And then there are those of us who aren't afraid of the child. But the problem is, the child has friends. And they're just as afraid of that child and everything else, and they look to the Constitution too. My problem with politicians, most of them are white, most of them are old, is that you know what white supremacy is. You grew up, but ultimately you're afraid of that child. And now you have a child in the White House. And I don't use the word child lightly. But in terms of everybody figuring this out, let me give a shout out. Assalamu alaikum. But in terms of people beginning to figure out some of the metrics of where we are, you have to understand that. You have to understand that when you watched George Floyd be killed, he wasn't killed by another man. He was killed by a child. Ahmaud Arbery. He wasn't killed by 3 white men. He was killed by 3 white children. Sandra Bland wasn't killed by officers. He was killed by a child. There's so many of these stories of people being killed by children masquerading as adults, still holding on to the breast of an irrelevant document, the Constitution, if you will, and we haven't figured that out yet. We need to go and march someplace in a house and start writing our own Constitution. The laws that are going to allow us to live and protect our families and allow us to have growth. This Constitution doesn't work. Every aspect of Black life has had to be argued over and over and over again. Where does it wind up? In the Supreme Court. And what does the Supreme Court argue? Constitutional law. not common sense, constitutional law. Therefore, separate but not equal will take you 5 to 7 years to get to that point. That I see a school that I want to go to because that school has better resources and I have an opportunity to get a better education should just be a natural thought, an intelligent thought. But it has to go through the hoops of constitutional law. I'm going to tell you why people don't like Islam. Islam does not respect constitutional law. It respects God's law. For the true Christians, constitutional law doesn't like you either. That's why you have a thing called separation of religion and state. Because they were thinking about you too. So as we begin to wrap up, brothers and sisters, we've got a couple minutes. What are we going to do about this child? This child that runs around our community? See, the police back in the day, everybody knows that was slave patrols. But they were slave patrols that were just above the people they were going to oppress. And so you put law, illegal law, in the hands of children. And we continue to put law, illegal law, in the hands of children. We give them immunity for the things they do. Not being able to sue the police and these police unions. I'm sure the police unions have a good purpose, but when people are wrong, they're wrong. You can't protect people when they're wrong. That's all I'm saying. Let me give a shout out to my brothers real quick. Mikhail, good to see you. Walaikum assalam. This is my big brother from Toledo, man. Love you, y'all. But let me wrap up because I only got a couple minutes here. They always talk about the building a caliphate here in the United States for Muslims. They always talk about that. And I used to talk about, man, you crazy. Ain't nobody building no caliphate. But then I looked at it and started talking about this whole thing about the Constitution. Anything that comes in contact with the Constitution that allows you to break it down like we've tried to break it down today, that the framers did not have the best interest of humankind when they did it. That's why you're still stuck with an electoral college. How are you going to go vote and then the electoral college figures out who's going to be president? Do you see the dichotomy? And that's all wrapped into the Constitution. We allow not just infamy, but we allow illegal behavior. If some of these things were not housed in the Constitution, we wouldn't even be having this conversation right now. And constantly, I want you to start reevaluate what you're seeing on TV and what you're reading in the news. Because some of it is just a manifestation of constitutional law. The words you have to say to get the interview, the words you have to say to get a position. Because there's a whole lot of political cooning going on. We're going to have to talk about political cooning too. And that means in the White House, a lot of coons. House and Senate, a lot of coons. Hell, in the Muslim community, we got a lot of coons too. I ain't gonna lie. I'm gonna call it what it is. It's not racial. Cooning is an attitude. We got a lot of that going on. But we're in a situation and scenario now, and this has always been the problem for the black man and the black woman. Doggone it. You stop being children. You stop being children. You stop allowing people to try and treat you like children. And you know what the children did? They ran and tried to figure out more laws to allow them to treat you like kids. One of these most heartbreaking things I ever saw in a movie was an elderly black man walking down the street, and a white little kid, maybe 8, told him, "Move, you." And that old black man moved. And it was for no other reason that this document, the United States Constitution, enables children to still be children and rule over adults. So as I wrap, brothers and sisters, I believe I will be coming back to this. It's almost every day you see a childish act come out of the White House. Don't wear a mask. People are dying. Don't wear a mask. But he doesn't say, I'm not going to wear it. He tells everybody else, you can't wear a mask either. That's children. These grown men, grown women being ruled by children. A child. That's like when we played basketball back in the day. Everybody can admit to this. Ever since when you played basketball back in the day, and you were the only one that had a basketball. And if you didn't get picked, you get mad, you take your basketball and go home. It's a sign of a child. It wasn't a sign of, hey man, I'll play next, no problem. I'll get my run in. I take my ball, nobody's gonna play unless I play. And the Constitution is framed like that. One of the things that I will never, ever overlook is the fact that it allows for criminal behavior. Donald Trump would have been locked up if he was a black man, a Latino guy, for the things he did, if he were any position less than president. And what did he lean on? What does he lean on? People who interpret the Constitution his way to his advantage. He's the worst of the worst. He's worse than a white supremacist. I don't know what's worse than a white supremacist, but he's worse than a white supremacist. Constantly on the nipple of the United States Constitution to keep feeding him. And here's the point. Everybody knows when you breastfeed, there's only one baby that could be on there doing it. He makes sure he's the only one on it. Nobody else is getting fed. So I'm going to wrap here, and I just want you to think about what I said today. I definitely want to give another shout out to Mr. Khalid Muhammad, because he said something to me, and I said he's right. Think of everything that has to go through a constitutional filter. Healthcare, gender, education, where you live, voting, rights, Constitution. Do you know why Native Americans are on treaties, on reservations? Treaties that are considered constitutional and they were legal, but they won't go back and change because you're dealing with children. And here we are in 2020 dealing with a situation as adult people, as adult logical people, we find ourselves fearful and scared of children. Marinate on that. See you guys tomorrow. Preacher Mars, SOS Shout Out Show. God bless you and have a good remainder of this Sunday. And I thank you for tuning in. Let's rewrite the damn Constitution. Assalamu alaikum.